talking mostly today about using double. Double is not the only way to balance. And as I mentioned in the workshop on Saturday, which a couple of you heard, but most of you did not. Just as far as our terminology goes, because I was actually asked by Paul when he saw my flyer. He said somebody came up and asked me, well, what's the difference between balancing and the balancing double and a reopening double? And the answer is not much. They can just about be used interchangeably. In all of my materials, I have given somewhat unique definitions to both. Anytime you act in the pass-out seat, you are balancing. If you are in the position where you get to make the decision whether the auction continues or comes to an end, which we commonly call the pass-out seat, we also call that the balancing seat. So those terms are used interchangeably. So we talk about a balancing double. The opponents are about to stop at 2 hearts. The last bid was 2 hearts by your left-hand opponent. Pass, passed, you. All right, are you going to let them play 2 hearts, or are you going to balance? And then I use the term reopening specifically for the situation where it's the opening bidder who does this. So, you open a spade, they overcall 2 diamonds, your partner passes, your right-hand opponent passes, and it's back to you. So I use reopening in that just in case anybody is, if you see these terms, what are you talking about? So, I don't know. Sometimes maybe I'm a little too literal, but when I see the word reopening, to me that suggests that you open at some time. Thus, reopening. But we are going to be talking not just about we are going to focus on that reopening double, and that's what the handout is on, that specific situation. But we want to make some general comments about balancing as a really important strategy, particularly when you're playing match points. When you're playing with just regular old duplicate pairs, and this is one of those things that Mike Lawrence says in one of his books. He says, this is balancing is something we do routinely that, technically, if you think about how bridge was conceived and, you're playing rubber bridge or even to some degree with your team games, that this is bad bridge, but it's good match points. You think if the opponents have bid to a part score, they're not going to bid a game, and it looks like this is their hand. Why do I want to step into this? Why don't I just leave this alone and and live to fight on another hand? But you are giving away a lot of match points if you cowardly pass on a lot of these auctions. Now, sometimes people start to take it to the other extreme and they get into auctions where they should maybe just leave it alone. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of those, the conditions that we look for with our balancing. But if you are in the pass-out seat, balancing could be some different things. And again, we'll talk about some other ways to balance, but here we are looking primarily at double because that is probably the most common form of balancing. What about an auction like this? You're in 4th seat, and your left-hand opponent opens a club, and this is passed around to you. Well, what do we know? We know this person doesn't have much at all, right? They couldn't even scrape up a response to their partner's 1 club. That's a pretty weak hand. Now, partner we don't know about. It certainly doesn't take much to slip in an overcall at the 1 level, right? And so we look at this like, well, partner didn't overcall a heart, partner didn't overcall a spade. But your partner may have some values here, right? if they don't have a 5-card suit to overcall and their hand is maybe the wrong shape for a takeout double, sometimes partner actually has a pretty good hand. Sometimes partner has a full opening hand and doesn't have a call. And by the way, when they open the bidding, especially if it's they stole your bid situation, what if partner wanted to open one club? And one club got opened in front of them, and and so now they look at their hand and like, well, do I have an alternative? Can I double? No, this isn't really the right shape for double. Can I bid a no trump? No, I only have 13 points. I've got the club stopper, but I need 15 to overcall a no trump. It is okay to pass. And some people have a hard time understanding that. Some people think they are absolutely obligated to bid when they have opening values. But sometimes you have to change gears. You are not obligated to bid when you don't have a bid that describes your hand. And the thing that I would definitely stay away from in that situation in particular is the off-shape double. It's a very bad practice that a lot of people do, and then they find themselves getting into situations they can't extract themselves from very easily. And part of the reason that you shouldn't stretch to do anything unusual, or that is not a good description of your hand here in what we would call the direct seat, is that the burden and the pressure is really on this person. So we let the person who is in the pass out seat, we're going to give that person a lot more liberty. And so what that does is it helps, it balances things out. I mean, literally. Because if your partner will take possibly light action here to keep the auction open, what they do is they protect you when you have values but you don't have a good bid. And so that's why we'll let you double over here pretty light. And we may be talking, 8 or 9 points even. You definitely don't need an opening hand when you're in the pass out seat to balance. It's a lot easier for you over here to act, particularly if you are short in the opponent's suit. So if you're relatively short in clubs, you're probably going to have some kind of call that you can make. So that's kind of the
But
true.
you don't have to be really short in clubs. You could have 3 clubs and still.
You might, but again, the more we increase your length in their suit, the less attractive double is. Now you may still balance, but you may be balancing in a different way. Now this situation here is what I at least. Oops. That's what I think of as the classic reopening situation. So once the overcall has come in, that means that the opening bidder is guaranteed one more chance to bid, right? And we can certainly construct a lot of hands where you would say, all right, I know my partner didn't bid, but I have a pretty good hand, and I don't want to just sell out to one spade. A lot of times we see these situations where, one person on each side has most of the high card strength, and then each of our partners has relatively weak hand, which suggests that the values on this deal are pretty evenly split, and that we're probably going to be battling for some kind of part score, and then the trick is just to try and find our best fit. So, we opened a club and partner couldn't scrape up a bid over there for us. On the other hand, the overcaller's partner didn't bid either, didn't raise spades, or introduce a new suit or anything like that. So we're probably not going to be letting this thing just die at the one level very often on an auction like that. So So that's situation number 2.
Does this double mean he shortened spades?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we're going to be
make
spending
sure.
quite a bit of
Okay.
time on that with a more full example of why you want to get in there. And then we can actually have this situation, and this is one we were.
So that also show that you're also short in clubs, that it was meant to be a short club. Otherwise, could rebid.
You're talking about the doubler?
Yeah, the doubler.
No, you have a club suit.
You do have a club suit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to have a real club suit on this auction. Doesn't have to be 5 or 6 long, but it's going to be a real suit.
Okay.
Yeah. Your double there is effectively a takeout of spades.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the suit. That's the suit the opponent's bid. Over here, yes. And so then this is the one, and like I said, this is the kind of thing that we see. The kind of thing we see often when we're playing match points. We were never in the auction, but now that the opponents are about to stop at 2 hearts, suddenly we want to get into the auction. So the idea here is, well, the deck is probably split pretty evenly as far as which side has the high card points, right? No one may have, one side may have a slight edge when it comes to, we talk about the balance of power, but it's not a decisive edge. Because if either the opener or the person who raised had much better of a hand, somebody would be making a game try, right? Either this person would be inviting rather than
Right.
just bidding 2 hearts, or the opener wouldn't be just letting this go at 2 hearts without at least a game try. And so the idea here is that you're in the pass out seat, that you can balance in some fashion and keep this auction going. You could very well have a hand that might be the right shape for a takeout double of a heart, but you passed the first time because you weren't strong enough, right? You could have an 8 or 9 point hand that is a singleton or a doubleton in hearts and support for the other suits, and you're like, all right, well, I'm not going to make a takeout double now. The hand's not good enough. But it's actually relatively safe to get in at this point. In auctions where the opponents have a fit, it tends to be safer for you to get in. This is a little bit of a contrast from, most of the time we say that the best strategy is, if you decide you're going to bid with a hand, bid early and then be done with it, right? That's why we say things like you never preempt and bid again. You get the whole hand out there with your first bid, and then partner gets to make the rest of the decisions, right? So, in a lot of situations, it's dangerous to back in, but when the opponents have a fit, it's actually safer. And so while you might not have liked the idea of getting in early and taking action with too light of a hand the first time around, the idea here is that, well, if they have a fit, we have a fit. So it's very common that we balance here, that we don't just let 2 hearts go. Now, there are a lot of things that we want to look at here. Some people, I think, get the idea that, you don't let the opponents play at the 2 level. That's just unacceptable. And then they balance every time. But you still want to use some discretion. And vulnerability is going to be the big one there. So, if you're vulnerable and they're not, you are not absolutely compelled to keep this auction going with a double or a balance or something like that. I mean, you can, I don't want to suggest that you can't balance an unfavorable vulnerability. But you want to be a lot more judicious about when you do. So that is part of it here. And we talked about, one of the things that we talked about and spent quite a bit of time in the workshop on Saturday talking about is with this idea of how to tell takeout doubles from penalty doubles, because it can get a little tricky on some auctions. And one of the points that we made on Saturday that I'll reiterate today is that when the opponents have found a fit at the 2 level, doubles are 100% for takeout, never penalty. So if you're sitting over here and you have 5 hearts, you know the opponents are getting a bad break, you just go quietly, right? If you actually think you're beating 2 hearts, which I don't think you're gonna pick up a lot of hands that you're gonna be convinced that you are, which is one of the reasons, again, why we like to balance is, that the opponents are in a fairly comfortable spot and they've only contracted for 8 tricks. But if you think they are in a bad spot, don't balance there, because you may in that case be removing the opponents from a spot that isn't going to be great and putting your side into a contract that may not be great, right? So
Is there a point count that you should have?
You might do this. You might do this with as few as, say, 7 or 8 points. If I'm much weaker than that, I'm actually starting to get worried that maybe the opponents do have the balance of power, and they may be missing something. Like maybe they should have been making a game try, and somebody went a little too conservative or had an ace hidden in their hand, and then you don't want them to find that yet. And I've had this happen before, and it's really embarrassing. But where I did something like balance with a double, and then the auction proceeded to go like this. And that's a nonsense auction. In theory, the opponents shouldn't be doing that, because why would this person go on the game when they couldn't make a game try the first time? And 3 hearts here was clearly not a game try because they didn't even invite. But I've had that happen before. And the opponents find themselves in a making game, which they probably should have bid the whole time, but they didn't, and they only got a second chance because I reopened the bidding for them. That's why I say, if I'm in the balancing position and partner never bid, and my hand is really light, like 6 points, I'm like, well, I've got the right shape to balance, but I smell a rat here. So sometimes in that case, it is better to just let it go. But the reason that I don't want to give you a firm point count, as to in deciding whether or not you want to balance, is because I do think it has more to do with shape than points, and we're looking at vulnerability. So I would balance pretty aggressively if I'm not vulnerable and they are. I would balance a lot of times if both sides are equal vulnerability, though not quite as aggressively as when we're at favorable. And then when we are at unfavorable vulnerability, I'm going to be more careful about it. So, what are the reasons to balance? Why are we doing this?